everybody. I think I am live. Go ahead and hop on. I am. Okay, cool. Sound is good. Go ahead and let me know in the chat when you guys can hear me. Sorry I'm late. My kittens were trying to decide whether or not they were going to behave, and they chose violence instead, so they are playing in the living room. I was like, this isn't going to work. You have to go. All right, so welcome to another episode of B&B, where I read books and smoke weed. Two of my most favorite pastimes. Hi, Daisy. I'm really excited for the book we're going to dive into tonight. I have already read this book, and it was fabulous. I'm also really excited to be able to kind of read it on the internet because it's not super accessible. The cheapest you can find this book online right now is $320. It's out of print, and after reading it, I can kind of see why it's out of print. It does a very good job of tying together the metaphysical, the mythological, the archetypal realms with the realm of like scientific thought and modern advancements in science. I actually bought this. So the book is called The Sign of the Serpent, The Key to Creative Physics. And even the way the book came to me is super synchronistic. So of course I got it from Tavis over at Etheric Circle. I give that man like all my money. Like seriously. But it was priced well out of my price range for a paperback book made in 1990. It was priced like a little over $200, and I commented on it like, oh man, if I could afford it, you know? And then Sharon was like, we should do a crowdfunding over on Patreon or, you know, the internet in general to get you this book. I think you need this book. And, you know, she's been a follower of my work since I first launched my Patreon. So she knows just by looking at the table of contents that it's all up in my rabbit holes. You know, the serpent and the cross or the swastika, these are symbols that I have dove into heavily. I dove into it in my Atlantis rabbit hole, which is available here. I dove into it in a couple of my earlier rabbit holes. The one on Ophiuchus, which is also available here on YouTube. This sort of universal symbol that we see throughout cultures spanning deep, deep, deep into antiquity. And I, of course, tie it to Atlantis. Because, you know, I'm a firm believer that these things have like an origin point, and that is why the mythologies are so similar. But it can be argued that these things just manifest from the collective unconscious, and that's why things are so similar. But, you know, I'm a firm believer in that pre-Diluvian civilization. So Sharon was like, we should do a crowdfunding. And several of you were so kind to Venmo me a little bit of money. And then Amanda over at The Birth of You, make sure you follow her too. She bought like a ton of readings and Venmo'd me some money, and I was able to. And then Tavis took it like 50% off. And so I was able to get the book. And so I knew that this book was going to be significant. I have this weird sort of, I don't know, deal with the cosmos or my guides or whatever, but my books have always found me in very synchronistic ways, usually like weird synchronistic events at like a thrift store or something like that, but my books always find me at the proper times, and my guides or my higher self or source, whatever you want to call it, speaks very loudly to me in books. Even sometimes like the inscription that someone wrote in the cover, or like a certain page will be bookmarked or like dog-eared, and I'll like make sure to read that page, and it has something that like I really needed to hear, or something someone underlined. I get my messages very strongly from books. Oftentimes it's things I disagree with, which is honestly what I thought my experience with this book was going to be. Yes, I wanted to see what he had to say about, the serpent and the cross or the swastika, which are, rabbit holes that I've been in. But I really was getting this book to kind of get in the head of the occultists at CERN. This book was written in 1990, so of course it doesn't have any of our modern findings of like the Higgs boson or anything like that, but I was really hoping to kind of get in the head of the guys at CERN. This picture stood out to me, him sitting there talking to this dude with the Shiva statue right there, and I really thought I was going to disagree with the vast amount of stuff written in this book, and of course there's a lot that I do. Vedic tradition in general, to me, is very polarized in the masculine consciousness. It stems from, the Indo-European, Aryan expansion, and so it stems from the sort of mythologies that are polarized into the patriarchy, right? They have the storm gods, they have the sun gods, and they're usually combating a serpent. They're usually like against it, trying to kill it. The serpent usually represents the enemy's gods in a lot of these cultures that the Vedic tradition stems from. But, I do tend to jive with some of the Vedic mythologies. My problem is that the feminine consciousness over there is usually only seen as like a consort. The Trinity in the Vedic tradition is all men. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, they're all men. And it is very much polarized in the light. So of course I have some of my own notes where I would like tweak some of the things he had to say, but for the most part, I agree with a lot of where he went. He does a really good job of tying together all these different parts of, the metaphysical realm, and then also showing how that mirrors in, protons and neutrons and electrons and like electromagnetism and EMFs. And all of these things that now we see are being used as weapons against us. He, of course, speaks to the healing modalities that can be made with these, particularly the curing of cancer, apparently, all the way back in like 1986. So I'm pretty excited to dive into it. I don't think this video is going to be that long. I don't think I've ever said those words before in my life, you guys. I'm not feeling that great, so I think we're just going to read a chapter. We're just going to read the first chapter, which is titled The Sign of the Serpent, and then we'll dive into the second chapter, in a couple of weeks. The second one is The Sign of the Swastika. But the other chapters in the table of contents are, we're gonna read the prologue, and which is entitled The Secret of India, and then we'll read the first chapter, The Sign of the Serpent. The other chapters are titled The Sign of the Swastika, and he speaks to like the symbolism behind it, and how it's tied to like literally every culture across the entire planet, so many, and how it also speaks to this sort of like spiral, this cyclical motion of creation, which is something I've also dove into several times, this like power of the spiral, right? And I think it's perfect to dive into that around this. Maybe we will read the 2 chapters, we'll see how long it is. That sort of energy of the spiral around this month, because this is the time of year when our sun aligns with the super galactic center, like that biggest source of spiraling energy in our vast cosmic logos. So then it also goes on to speak about the rainbow serpent and the secret of Wangina, the hidden power of idols, And then it goes into more of the scientific mind, but bringing in the wisdom from the like background knowledge you just obtained from going through the metaphysical realm. And they speak on life force energy, this concept of new physics, and he breaks it down into all these different realms. You know, I was really interested in the electromagnetism and the frequency, and if you guys have been following along with some of my other rabbit holes, I'm sure you're not surprised. So I'm going to take a hit from my bong, and then we're going to go ahead and go in. If you guys are smoking with me, you can comment in the chat what you're smoking. Last time people were all fancy. They're like, a joint with a little bit of lavender and this and that. I'm like, oh, so fancy. I love it. All right. I stole Eddie's bubbler because my pipe fell behind the bed. So I have his little special spill-proof thing. I would like to start this off by apologizing to the entire Vedic Hindu culture for how bad I am going to butcher so many of these words. Oh, it's going to be horrible, and I apologize. Just know that I'm doing a horrible job. I was going to read the back first, but it's in the caption down below, so you guys just can go ahead and read that. I actually think this is a horrible summary of this book. It doesn't even go into half the stuff that this book goes into. So we'll just skip that. Okay. If we could have a genuine synthesis of Eastern spiritual insight with Western science, then we'd create a profound vision of the universe. That's a quote by Renee Weber, which is a professor of philosophy at Rutgers University in New York. I want to also kind of preference this with saying, like, you know, in this spiritual realm, for people who are supposedly like in the fifth dimension and above duality and like in of unified consciousness and all this jazz, they tend to have very black and white thinking. And I either see, you know, the weird spiritual people who think like, you know, maybe they've done a little bit too much DMT and a little bit too much of the mathy drugs. And, you know, they're convinced we're in some sort of like simulation. And, you know, they will probably become transhuman and be proponents of this sort of like AI religion. We see that in the spiritual realm. And then we see the far extreme, which is like science is bad. Like all Western thought, all Western science, all Western medicine is fucking bad. It's all bad. And we should just, you know, leave it to the wind or whatever. That's not even, I don't even know what that means. But we should just like forget about it and, you know, herbs and this and that all the way. And as much as I am all for the herbs and the this and that all the way, and I have personally been victimized by Western medicine at a very young age, and I do not trust any doctors, I actually really enjoy the realm of science. And before I was woo-woo in the slightest bit, I was very scientific minded. That was like my first love in school. I thought that stuff was so cool, and I really always wanted to kind of understand why we're here and why things work the way they work. And, you know, I was like so not woo-woo at all. I thought all of that stuff was total bullshit because it was very logical, very much my masculine mind. And it wasn't until I had literal experiences that I could not deny and a switch was flipped that I was like, oh, wow, I was wrong. But, you know, science was my first love. It really was. And I thought that this was how we were going to be able to kind of understand how things work. And I think if we pair it with spiritual wisdom, we very much can. Rudolf Steiner talked about this. He's like, these advancements in technology are not bad. You know what I mean? He's all, humanity is just advancing too far technologically, too much in that like realm of scientific materialism. while not also advancing in the realm of spirituality and the innate wisdom of, our existence. We have to have that sort of balance, right? And so I think that we can't just throw science out with the bathwater, right? And I think that's what he was really focusing on. And, Steiner as well. And it seems like they have, at least those, like, in the top of the scientific fields, like I'm thinking CERN and things like that, like a mad genius scientists that come up with these contraptions, many of them are occultists. Like, many of them are well versed in the metaphysics, and they are tapping into the realm of the unseen, and they are using it to control, to harness this sort of life force energy, to manipulate this sort of, they call it in here the morphogenic field, or like the etheric realm that's all around us, that Akashic field, right? To manipulate our consciousness. And if we, as occultists or spiritual folk or whatever it is that you identify as, who are, not trying to dominate and control the world, but are trying to remember and reclaim this innate wisdom, this innate spiritual truth, and help spread it to the masses. If we reject the realm of science outright, we will never be on the same level as like the evil occult fucking polarized wizards trying to control us, the governors of that eighth sphere that Steiner talks about, the top of the top, the people who are really pulling the strings. We have to have this sort of background knowledge. I'm sure you guys have noticed in my work, I tie in recent discoveries in space, black holes, what happens at a black hole, the dynamics of it. When I talk about Andromeda, I talk about how that galaxy is shooting towards the Milky Way in space. They're going to collide. They're going to create a super galaxy. Therefore, it represents union. It represents alchemy. It represents this transmutation and this creation of a third of something that's beyond duality, And science triggered that original thought, and then it was that metaphysical, symbolic mind that came through to kind of decode it on a spiritual level. We need to have this balanced dynamic, And like I said, I thought I was going to disagree with a lot of this book, and I don't. I don't. I think this guy is kind of on our side. So we'll dive in. He dedicated this book to a little tiger who has always been moved by such considerations. I wonder who that is. I wonder if that's like his kid or something. And the book was published in 1990. And a lot of the studies in here are things that we never hear about. And he cites them all from scientific journals and everything like that. And, they've been studying this stuff for a long time. This is around the time I was born, Acknowledgements. Thank you. To all the, quote, serpents of the Indian subcontinent who, over the years, have assisted in the investigation of such matters, and to all those of the creative physics movement whose work reflects a deep concern for a much-needed transformation of global consciousness, and in particular to Dr. Sergi Barmasian, whose assistance and patience in the transposition of the language of physics into comprehensible English have been made invaluable. So he studied with I'll just read this one-liner here, the author, Mark Balfour, is a well-known international photojournalist and a longtime student of the culture of the Indian subcontinent. In recent times, he has worked closely with physicists in documenting the discovery of the life force energy field, which apparently was documented and discovered in 1986, which I personally think is super cool because I was born in 1987. And I'm a firm believer that as we discover things like, as Uranus was discovered in astrology, Uranus, literally, we needed a telescope to discover it. And so therefore, Uranus governs this sort of progressive mind, this sort of inventor, this genius. It represents technology, it represents electricity, and from there we have this expansion of all this stuff. I said the same thing when we got these pictures of the black holes, and these things were really, truly, fully discovered, then they were activated within our consciousness. And then everybody born after that has this sort of thing already activated within them. And so I think it's super interesting that they discovered the life force energy field the year before I was born. They also had really big eclipses that next year that were on the supergalactic center too. So it was a big time in the cosmos in general, 86, 87. Okay, prologue. Secret India. The archaic records of the Hindu civilization should be considered as the earliest records of human history, carefully preserved and woven into the fabric of unbroken tradition. This collected wisdom of the ages is embodied in the Vedas, the Upanishads, and the Puranas. I always get that one wrong, but I finally learned how to say Upanishads. India's ancient texts, those are all of India's ancient texts. There are other ones too. As the, quote, supreme sacred knowledge of India. Various systems have arisen from the pure, esoteric teachings, and while maintaining much of the original understanding, many aspects have been transposed to fit particular requirements for particular times throughout history, that's what happened in the Christian tradition. The Spanda school of Kashmir Shaivism and its doctrine of vibration, which upholds Shiva as the symbolic deity for the life principle or consciousness, is closely allied, which to me is already strange, because Shiva is the destroyer, right? There's Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, the creator, the preserver, and the destroyer. So to have the destroyer represent consciousness to me already it just doesn't, I don't get it. But there's some things I don't get, and I'll let you guys know. You will hear from me. Okay, so where were we? Okay, so Shiva is the symbolic deity for the life principle of consciousness. Shiva does represent the destroyer, and he represents the destroyer of life, but also the destroyer of ignorance. So maybe that's why he represents the deity of consciousness, because he wipes away the Maya, the ignorance, so that you can see truth too. Okay, so he is closely allied, however, to the original Vedic insight. The term Hindu or Hinduism is applied throughout these pages for convenience and practicality. It applies to the original esoteric viewpoint, irrespective of some terms which are not of Vedic origin, i.e. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, which are post-Vedic terms for the original trinity of Sura, Vayu, and Anji. 3 people I've literally had never heard of until I read this book. The implications, in essence, are the same. In recent years, intense archaeological and anthropological work has revealed that the Vedic Aryan civilization can be dated from available evidence to approximately 10,000 BC, around the time of the last glacial period. So that's like right after the fall of Atlantis, and the esoteric doctrines of Blavatsky and Steiner, they speak, and many others, speak of these ages, from the Lemurian or Polarian age to the Hyperborean age to the Lemurian age to the Atlantean age to the Aryan age, which is a word that's used interchangeably for the Indo-European cultures, which originated around Iran and like Babylonian and Sumeria and around that area. Even like into Turkey, and then they spread all throughout into Eastern Asia and Europe. So, we can often get hung up on that word because of its connotation with World War II and Hitler, but it existed long before him. Like everything, he stole pretty much every single thing and then just inverted it on its head. Okay. Vedic influence spread from, they're going to tell you pretty much what I just said. Vedic influence spread from Egypt and Turkey into the Western Himalayas, Eastern Asia, and from the Caspian Sea in the north to the Persian Gulf in the south. And it appears possible that the origin of the Aryans, or the Indo-Iranian is also another term for them, could have been in the northern polar regions and being pushed down south by ice. They settled in the above named areas. So it's believed that they originated in this, mythic civilization in the far north that many cultures speak of, that was probably perhaps what Atlantis is often mistaken for, but perhaps it's something even prior to that. And then because of the Ice Age and the ice growing around that time, they were pushed down and were forced to populate all of these other locations. The word Arya appears in the first, and the work of Robert Seffer, he's an anthropologist on YouTube. He dives into a lot of this cultural stuff. And then I also really enjoy this Indo-European mythologist, but I cannot, revered or something, I don't know the name of his channel, but I have been binging his stuff lately and he's really awesome. If you're a Patreon member, I have been posting his stuff over in the mythology section, so you can go find some stuff. The word Arya appears for the first time in the Rig Veda, and its meaning there is, quote, civilized, right? They were these more civilized solar cult cultures, right? And then there's the serpentine cultures that are looked at as the enemy, and those are usually the more feminine, matrilineal cultures that are rooted in the connection to the land, the connection to the earth goddess, right? That those invading cultures were severing as they invaded, right? So the word Arya appears for the first time in the Rig Veda, and its meaning there is civilized, thus not denoting any race of people at all. The myth of an Aryan invasion of India around 15,000 BC has perpetuated by many European Indologists, is without foundation in the light of current evidence. Yeah, and mainstream academia, all the stuff that I've been saying, they don't agree with that at all. This is a esoteric doctrine, historical lens rooted in the more occult understandings of our history. But that guy, Robert Sefford, does a really good job of explaining this with a shit ton of actual archaeological evidence. Okay. So the myth of the Aryan invasion of India around 15,000 BC, as perpetuated by many Europeans, is without foundation in the light of current evidence. Around 7,000 BC, however, a battle known as the Dasaharajina battle was fought, and the Vedics, living together in the vast region, began a migration southwards and eastwards to the present-day India, westwards towards Greece and Italy, and then northwards. The capital of the empire at the time of the battle was Hervarta, a place near Khorasana in eastern Iran, with the entire region being known as Spata Shindu Paradisha. Oh my gosh. Okay, so the fact that I am even reading a book on the internet right now literally speaks volumes to the amount of healing I have done to my lovely Chiron in Gemini. Oh my gosh. This reading was really hard for me as a kid. It still is now. I'm like, they diagnosed me with a shit ton of learning disabilities. The fact that I'm even doing this, I find hilarious. And the fact that I do not care how bad I'm doing it, I find even more hilarious. Because, old me would have fucking cared. Okay. I need to smoke a bowl because that was a lot of words I can't say. At least I butcher the words from every culture. You know what I mean? All of them. I can't say anything. I can't say it. Even basic English, if I don't understand the word, I can't say it. Okay. A common culture existed from the Indus to the Nile at one stage, which would explain the use of Vedic concepts in Egyptian religion and Indian motifs, such as the lotus and the crux and the ankh in Egyptian architecture and art. The hooded cobra also assumed a position highly relative to Vedic thinking. I can't remember, but I don't think he even mentions Atlantis at all in this book at all. And so many of the questions that history and anthropology and archaeology has could be so easily explained if you just are willing to consider a pre-Diluvian civilization. You throw that in the mix and so much stuff all of a sudden makes sense. But people have a really hard time with that, and I'm almost positive he didn't go there. The Vedic civilization is seen as a continuous one from the early glacial period to modern times, and historically it thus forms the oldest living record of mankind's existence on the planet. Its oral and written traditions speak as testaments to a highly developed scientific civilization belonging to antiquity, and separated from our own scientifically grounded civilizations by centuries of ignorance, superstition, and dogma. Well, never mind. And by the way, I finally figured out how to put captions on. Everybody was asking me to do it, and for the longest time, I thought that I was doing what I needed to do for them to be there, but they were never there. And so then, of course, I thought YouTube is out to get me, which they legitimately are. But this time it was actually my fault, and I just needed to scroll down a little bit. So they should be there. I don't know if they work while I'm actually live, but if you're playing this back later, they'll be there. And I know it's way easier to follow along with subtitles. I can't watch anything without subtitles. Okay. I'm going to read that paragraph one more time. The Vedic civilization is seen as a continuous one from the early glacier period to modern times, and historically it thus forms the oldest living record of mankind's existence on this planet. Its oral and written traditions speak as testaments to a highly developed scientific civilization belonging to antiquity and separated from our own scientifically grounded civilization by centuries of ignorance, superstition, and dogma. So I guess, yeah, he was still crediting that to just the Vedics and not going back further. Okay. This knowledge, purer than our own, was based on deep insights into true workings of nature, structured on a direct, intimate association with natural forces, their cycles and their rhythms, and the realization that all existing phenomenon are manifestations of one universal formative cause actualizing itself in innumerable levels, culminating in the evolution of living beings who provide the perfect vehicle of expression for the living universal force. A tree, as it were. I hope you guys have watched my Axis Mundi video too here on YouTube. And I've tied this area of the sky to this very ancient mythology of this world tree, this polar pillar, this Axis Mundi. And they talk about it in this book too, which of course made me happy. This did both touches on many of my rabbit holes. So, they're connected to the natural forces, their cycles, their rhythms, and the realization that all existing phenomenon are manifestations of one universal formative cause, actualizing itself in innumerable levels, culminating in the evolution of living beings who provide the perfect vehicle of expression for the living universal force, a tree, as it were, expressing itself through its seed. The phenomenon, outward world, is therefore not to be denied or rejected, but to be accepted as reality. Not a material reality only, but rather a reality with two aspects, a physical as well as an intelligent, conscious existence. The universe was seen to have a spiritual or subtle energetic base, with the purpose of life and all organic life being a continuous conscious evolution, exhibiting a perfect order and precision from the microscopic atom to the vast galaxies. The universe implies design, and design must imply a mind. All of nature, it was realized, is interlinked, interrelated, and interdependent, with no facet being truly understandable as an isolated unit, but only as part of the whole. I love that one. I put stars by that line. A unity whose parts are in continuous flux, or in a state of dynamic equilibrium. The world was seen as a living organism, and a human being as a living embodiment of those principles which organize and direct the universe, a self-perfecting product of the, quote, grand design, a model of the universe itself. If one understands oneself perfectly, quote, to know thyself, as the initiate says, then one then understands the nature of the forces which formed him or her, as well as anatomy, rhythm, proportion, mind, and consciousness. I circled this paragraph. It must be really good. Okay. The basic oneness of the universe is the fundamental characteristic of this ancient insight, which has been taught in every preceding philosophy, religion, and higher science by the sages of China, Chaldea, Egypt, and Greece during their, quote, golden ages. It is also one of the most important revelations of modern creative physics, the resulting conclusions being almost a declaration of the bankruptcy of the total scientific view of reality, upon which our present technological society is based. Hinduism became the modern word, invented by foreigners, to label this arcane knowledge of Hindu Sathan, or as it is known today, India. It is not a religion as we understand religion in the West. It is not the message of Hinduism as a, quote, belief or faith, or of the Hindi-speaking race. There exists no prophets, no book of rules, no dogmas. The myriads of gods in the Hindu pantheon are but diverse personifications of natural energies, each one an attribute of that all-pervading universal force. The message of the Vedas, the Puranas, and the Upanishads is a message about reality, about science, art, philosophy, psychology, cosmology, medicine, and mathematics, forming integrated elements in a science of life, a synthesis of all facets of the human experience. Today we have only separation and conflict between each of these over-specialized fields, resulting in fragmentation rather than cohesion. Consequently, we have become alienated from the essential matrix of life. Hinduism, therefore, should be seen in this perspective to arrive at the proper and valuable conclusions that emerge from such an understanding. India's past, as well as her teachings, are still viewed by many with eyes colored by the ignorance, prejudices, and pet theories of historians, nurtured largely on writings of the early days of the British Raja and the so-called, quote, Orientalists of the 18th and 19th centuries. The allegorical nature of Indian insights may appear to the Western mind, may appear abstruse to the Western mind, but to interpret an ancient mentality in terms of our present intellectual, rational methods of understanding is to distort beyond recognition the substance and meaning of the past. A relatively new era of study called split brain research has indicated that humanity, particularly in the West, has somehow, over the past 2,000 to 2,500 years, achieved a disproportionate development of the intellectual left hemisphere of our brain, which governs logical, analytical thought processes, and sees only the parts, not the whole. I love that we're reading this right now while Mercury is retrograde, because Mercury governs that sort of like logical, analytical thought process, right? And when it's retrograde, we're supposed to kind of go inward in order to tap more into our innate senses, that logical, analytical mind gets in the way of us being able to truly align with. I always pick books that seem to be like, I didn't even think astrologically. I just finished this book and was like, damn, that's good. I'm reading it on the internet. Okay. So people are all up in their left brain and shit. And they go on to say that the World Health Society recognizes that 75% of people in our society have such a brain hemisphere imbalance. Our once intuitive insight, a right hemisphere pattern forming faculty, has since taken a back seat in favor of the logical, rationalizing methods of assessing reality. Orthodox science has been built on left hemisphere methods of determining reality, commonly referred to as Cartesian and Newtonian thinking, or, quote, reductionism, and influenced by the Greek atomists who held that matter and energy were separate and distinct. This mechanistic idea persisted until the early years of this century, when such a view was undermined by Einstein's relativity and quantum theory, which showed that energy and matter were not distinct, but interwoven, all matter being in essence condensed or crystallized energy, spirit becoming matter, as the ancients phrased it. In earlier periods, it appeared that our distant ancestors were highly intuitive. Logic and analytical thinking became central only to a later stage of human development. In the East, where ancient traditions and intuition linger in spite of the technological age, most personal encounters serve only to support the fact. Any real understanding of India beneath the tourist facade must, by necessity, come from an awareness of this consideration. It is difficult for a non-westernized Indian to analyze and experience objectively. The outside reality exists essentially as a challenge to better preserve, refine, and strengthen the inner. There is little active exploration of the world of events. There are just occurrences which influence the individual and not to be unduly questioned. Most Indian mentalities are embedded within the solid framework of family, clan, social, caste, and tradition, and one's physical nature is seen merely as an expression of a higher force or principle, the outer objective world being of significance only insofar as it affects the inner, it affects the self. The expressive nature of the Indian mind has always been endowed with a special character alien to a Western way of thinking, in as much as the development of consciousness is primary. Evolution is essentially a development of consciousness. Consciousness, seen as the essence of life, is the fuel of thought, and therefore mind. And as our physical bodies are directly influenced by mind and held in balance by the quality of our thoughts, the role of consciousness in the evolutionary process is evident. When it is eventually understood and taught in our faculties of so-called education that humankind, with all organic and inorganic life, is in reality a complex kaleidoscope of interacting energy and not a spectrum of isolated, separate physical objects, it will be realized that there exists levels of reality far too mysterious for common sense, logic, and reductionism to penetrate. In the West, we are mere children in the study of mind, of our overwhelming materialistic and linear mind, compartmentalized habits of thought. Most of the ills of our society are a result of it. An Indian acquaintance, now living in the West, illustrated this East-West disparity very simply when he applied in a sociological context. He stated, quote, "Never did I ever dislike a person for any particular reason. In my country, we were always taught that we were all children of the Creator. The feeling of love and humanness was very strong. All people were welcome in our house, no matter what time it was. It is only since I have lived in the West that I have known what it is like to be lonely, or to discriminate, to analyze and dislike that person or that thing. I'm still not sure why it happens, only that it is part of the Western psychology. In relation to our Western standards of education, it may be significant here to mention that a 16-year-old student friend attending a secondary school of learning in Bangalore, India, was deeply interested in the fact that Einstein's equation, E=mc², was fundamental to Eastern insight millennia ago. Energy and matter are interconvertible. Her Interest was heightened because her home study for the week consisted of Einstein's theory of relativity, an essential part of the curriculum at the school she attended. India's search into the inner depths of reality gave birth to some of the most profound insights of the human race. The ancient seers realized that consciousness is what a human being really is. Consciousness is the fundamental component of our existence, with the physical form merely a vehicle for its expression. Yogic meditative techniques embodying this understanding have captured the imagination of the West, as well as the wide endorsement of the medical profession, particularly in respect of stress and cancer therapy. Much of modern medicine, as well as the popular alternative medical treatments and natural therapies based on balancing the body's metabolism, are of ancient Ayurvedic origin. Surgical expertise was highly developed in early Hindus, the knowledge spreading to the Arabs, the Egyptians, and later to Greece. Acupuncture, based originally on the yogic model of energy flow in the human body, was later adopted by China and developed there during the Qin dynasty. The Arabic numerals and the concept of zero were developed by Indian mathematicians, and Indians were solving complex geometric problems long before the rest of the world was able to do so, including the so-called Pythagorean theorem. Most of the philosophical insights of the West had been part of the Indian thought process millennia ago. And they didn't even get it from India. They stole it from Egypt. Most of everything Greece knew, for the most part, they stole from Egypt. But then Rome stole it from them. So, and that's just history. Most of the philosophical insights of the West had been part of the Indian thought process millennia ago. Even Aesop's fables were of Indian origin, when the Sanskrit language itself being regarded as the mother tongue of all others. The West is in need of a philosophy of spiritual depth that does not suppress, diminish, or deny our intellectual and material nature, but rather balances our intellect against a more intuitive insight into the meaning of human life and the material expression of the universe. The manipulation of our environment for purposes of utility and commercial gain is reason enough to qualify that need. Our 20th century mind climate is a chaotic mess of contrary ideas, beliefs, anxiety, and conflict. Mental breakdown is a common occurrence. Drugs are a means by which many cope, and suicide is increasing at an alarming rate. The default has been recognized by countless numbers of thinking individuals, and the increasingly urgent reach towards the recovery of our rightful heritage is intensifying in spite of the lack of interest or the dispensing of any real knowledge by the media. The inability of religious bodies to protect any form of sensibility and the attempted preservation of the, quote, status quo by the established faculties of orthodox education, which teach us little or nothing about ourselves. That balance is able to be achieved by a marriage of the East and the West, values and ethics. India's destiny throughout the ages has been connected with man's inner development. No nation has accumulated such a vast experience or endured so long as a civilization, and it is into its great and it is into this great well, this timeless repository of wisdom, that those who thirst for knowledge must eventually dip for answers, to uncover the beginnings, or to marvel at the wonders lying submerged or hidden. Yeah, in Atlantis. I'm just kidding. The West in its infancy, alongside such millennia or insight, seeks to answer the riddle of life. in the atomic structure of gross matter. To understand India, whose teachings assume the opposite polarity, it is wise to reflect upon the nature of consciousness itself, for India's civilization speaks of and to the mind, not the physical. This is her substance, her mystery, and her great legacy to humanity. I love that every chapter cites the sources at the end and has the footnotes. Like, oh my god, it makes my life so much easier. Thank you to all the authors who structure their books that way. Okay, so the next chapter, that was the prologue. The next chapter is the sign of the serpent. We'll read that and then we'll go. But I am going to take a hit and drink some tea because my mouth is dry. Okay. I'm using my lighter as a bookmark. It's not going to help me out here. I have to move out of the way of the fan. Okay. Chapter 1. The sign of the serpent. The serpent, throughout time, has existed as a symbol of the energizing creative force of the one supreme universal spirit. In the human entity, it manifests as consciousness, reaching in its highest expression towards wisdom and enlightenment. In its lower aspect, it is related to fertility and regeneration. The serpent is the most profound image ever conceived to crystallize this dual principle in the human condition. Oh, it just starts with some weird thing like that. Okay. It's like a little poem. The fire flames when the fuel is stirred. The serpent, when assailed, makes a hood. Commonly, people show their greatness when stirred. It's an ancient Indian proverb. When Alexander the Great, circa 356 to 323 BC, was invading the cities of India, he found therein many sacred snakes, which were kept in caves and worshipped by the Indians with great devotion. The Indians, accordingly, with every kind of entreaty, implored Alexander to let no one molest the animal. To this he agreed. From the vast reaches of time, the serpent has been a potent symbol, reflecting as many aspects the occult meanings as the Garden of Eden itself, with which it is associated. Whether it is viewed as a physical or metaphysical symbol, the image has never been so degraded as it is today. In India, however, it still remains a living force, playing a prominent role in the lives of millions of people. Any observant traveler who moves from the snow-tipped Himalayas in the north to the sun-soaked sands of Cape Comorin in India's southern tip will encounter, particularly in the rural areas, and at sacred centers of pilgrimage, whether Shiva, god of both divine wisdom and regeneration, is the presiding deity. The serpent motif sculpted within shrines, impressed on myriads of stone implants in the ground and depicted in art. To most Westerners, it may appear as a mere decorative embellishment, reflecting the ambiguous presence of the cobra all over India, or possessing some remote significance in terms of local superstition or religious belief. In reality, however, the truth is far more profound. The symbol is representative of the essential fabric upon which the higher Indian mentality is woven. It has been so throughout India's recorded history. Images such as the serpent crystallize in similar forms. Universal principles relating to the creative process and the dynamic forces or energies operative throughout nature. The clearest insight, esoteric perhaps, has always belonged to the rishis, or initiates, although accessible to all those who secretly desire and are able to absorb and assimilate such, quote, secret truths by means of the heart rather than the intellect. Nothing is entirely secret, nor was it ever intended to be so. Closely guarded would be the more appropriate term. Certain information is not compatible with the psychology of the masses, something I'm realizing very much so. Lest it be trampled asunder, abused, ridiculed by skeptics, or used towards destructive ends, something we also see happening very much so. In no other country on earth have ancient traditions and their ritualized expression been held intact by their undiluted intact in their undiluted form from time immemorable. This great continuum is the real wonder of India, and it is here where the sign of the serpent was nurtured and preserved to this day that its exact significance is more clearly defined, which is true because all of the other cultures that were so strongly connected to the serpent over like a solar storm deity or whatnot were all destroyed. You know, the Druids, the Celts, which are pretty much the same thing. But many other mother goddess archetypes, even in Greece, Apollo, you know, the sun god, was responsible for like severing the Gaia lineage and that connection to the earth mother, right? But in India, they managed to hold on to that. Okay, the Nagas. In India, it is the hooded cobra and no other snake that is the object of veneration throughout the country. The Sanskrit name for the animal is Nag, the modern term, or Naga, the traditional title. The word cobra is derived from the Portuguese Cobra de Capello, meaning hooded serpent. Naga means wise serpent, the title given long ago to those who had acquired great wisdom. The female counterpart is the Nagini. The Nagas, non-related to the present inhabitants of Nagaland, one of India's eastern states. The Nagas, according to ancient sources, were an actual race identified as belonging to the Vedic Aryan civilization. They were of Caucasian appearance, and they possessed a rare knowledge, it is told, of magic or insight into natural forces. In nature, they were benevolent, and therefore regarded as, quote, white magicians. They worshipped the sun as a giver of life and heat, creator of night and day, responsible for the agent of veneration and fertility. They became the instructors of the Brahmins and were progenitors of the sun worship itself. The hooded serpent was their totem. The Nagas should be regarded as the initiates and the guardians of the ancient esoteric knowledge. the city of Nagpur in the state of Maharashtra. I actually think I got that one right, you guys. Maharashtra. I think I got that one right. Located at the geographical center of India, was considered to be the capital of their empire, formerly known as Naga-Dwapa. Yes, I got that one right too. One of the surviving relics of old India, known as, I got cocky too soon, Barahata Vrashna. James Ferguson, author of Tree and Serpent Worship from 1868, identifies the Nagas as a race of Turanian stock. Turania, spelled Turania. Amanda, I think you'll like this part. It kind of gives me like Tartarian vibes or whatever. That's a rabbit hole that I have not fully dove into yet, but I know exists. Okay, so this James Ferguson guy from 1868 identifies the Nagas as a race of Turanian stock. It looks kind of like it derives maybe from like Taurus, like some connection to like the bull, which is riddled throughout ancient cultures. Turania is an area of eastern Turkestan, which is now one of the central provinces of the USSR, which is now Russia. Situated between Afghanistan and the Caspian Sea, spawned, it appears, gifted stonemasons, and at the request of the Emperor Askoa, who ruled India during the 3rd century BC, the Naga named Ma'akala produced colossal images of Gautama Buddha and his two predecessors. Tirana, which is that name of that country, becomes significant in relation to Easter Island. Oh, that's interesting. I already read this, but the beginning I read a long time ago. Becomes significant in relation to Easter Island and its monolithic significance and its monolithic structures, due to the existing theory that the Malaysians of the South Pacific, the Fijians, for example, the people of Fiji, migrated to the Pacific from Tirana via Egypt. This connection, if correct, would prove Ferguson right. Naga symbols appear on 3rd century Buddhist monuments in the south of India and Buddhist sanctuaries such as Sharnath near Varanasi, were originally dedicated to serpent worship as far away as Java at the Great Border Supta. Naga images were well presented and show that the Nagas were prominent in Buddhist culture. I don't know if some of you guys might be new. So these B&B episodes originally started, I was like, hey, would you guys watch me read books on the internet and smoke weed, and then every time I mispronounce a word, we take a hit, kind of like a drinking game, but it's not a drinking game, it's like a smoking game, and also we're reading books and learning stuff while we do it. And people were like, yeah, we totally do that. But maybe not every time I pronounce a word, because you will get far too stoned. Maybe every 10 times. Okay. So, the famous University of Nalanda, the place that confers which means the place that confers the lotus, or spiritual knowledge, which flourished near Patna in the state of Bihar between the 5th and 12th centuries, was named after the Naga king. The university had 2,000 teachers and more than 10,000 students, each of whom was required to produce a book every year on the nature of consciousness and the human mind. This amounts to a total of 6 million books, apart from its own vast library of 9 million volumes. ransacked by Afghanistan invaders, it is reported that the university burned for 6 months after the event. Oh my gosh, it's like in Indian Alexandria. Its students from as far as Java, Sumatra, Korea, China, and Japan included Huazhang Tang, the Chinese traveler who studied there in the 7th century. Gautama, the Buddha himself, taught there. Investigations of the pre-Muslim monoliths in the Maldive Islands, situated off the coast of southwest India, have indicated Naga presence in that area. Thor Heyerdahl's work, The Maldive Mystery, being significant. On the Cromaldi coast, oh my god, of Tamil Nadu in southeast India, the Palva dynasty, which held sway during the 4th to 8th centuries, traced its lineage to Naga ancestors, as do many royal families in Kashmir in the north of India. The one-time center of learning, Taxila, oh my god, that can't be right. Whatever, I'm just going to go with it. Now in Pakistan, existed as the chief city of the Nagas in the north. Originally called Takshalia, the city is named after the great Naga chief, Takshaka, referred to as a, quote, carpenter, and a great healer in Vedic literature. I wonder if that's where we get some of the Jesus mythology from, too. The, carpenter. I don't know. I mean, the next sentence literally says the word Jesus, so let's find out. Okay, so the dude was a carpenter, this Takshaka, the Naga chief, right? And he was a great healer in Vedic literature, possessing the power to cure diseases, as well as snake bites. In his book, Jesus Died in Kashmir, a Faber Kaiser reveals that Taxila was known to the Christian savior who visited there en route to Kashmir. The knowledge of poisons and antidotes is one of the 8 chief subjects of Indian medical science, and it is strongly evident that the Naga Takshaka was looking upon as a patron of the medical profession. And we see that in the Greek mythology too. You know, we have Ophiuchus, that serpent bearer, and he's the same as Asclepius. They're the same deity, Roman Greek. With the staff, with the serpent, Moses has it too, you know what I mean? But that the caduceus that we see even today in the medical field for healing, right? I think the next sentence talks about the caduceus. Okay, hold on. Knowledge of poisons, 8 chief subjects of the Indian medical science, and it is strongly evident that Naga Takshaka was looked upon as a patron of the medical profession. The caduceus, which forms the emblem of the profession, was in all probability first identified with Takshaka. The coiled serpent or serpents around the central rod is a Naga symbolism. It was in Kashmir that Apollonius of Tyana, a Pythagorean philosopher, became instructed by the Nagas and completed his initiation into the mysteries. So this sort of rod and the serpent mythological emblem that we see throughout so many different mythologies. Sometimes it's a tree, sometimes it's a rod, right? In my Axis Mundi video here on YouTube, please watch that one. It's one of the most important ones I feel like I've ever done before at all. I tie that to the sky and how that is mirrored there with our pole star and the celestial pole, which sits opposite the galactic center, and how that celestial pole is encircled by Draco, the serpent, how it's guarding that still point, that middle pillar between extremes. So yeah, make sure you watch that video. Okay. The Bharata, the Puranas, and the Upanishads, India's ancient texts often cite the Nagas, and in the Ayurveda, which consists largely of magic spells, they are prominent. Their role as wise ones, instructors, and initiates is well documented, and their totem, the hooded cobra, often depicted in anthropomorphic form, has played a leading role not only in Hindu but in Buddhist art throughout India, Sri Lanka, Java, China, and Japan. Oh, look, see, I'm talking about Ophiuchus and Atlantis over here with my notes. Okay, in China and Tibet, the dragon is but a transposition of the serpent. The Chinese writers usually refer to the Nagas under that name, and the character of the dragon, as it appears in the folklore and literature of China and Tibet, is in great part derived from the Indian conception of the Naga, as the dragon signifying the being who excels in intelligence, breathes fire. The destructive action of snake venom resembles that of the all-devouring fire, and the snake belongs to those beings which are believed to possess a high degree that magical energy which is indicated by the Sanskrit word tajas, meaning heat or fire. Nagarjuna, the Indian adept who became a Buddhist in the 2nd century, was one who converted China to Buddhism. In Greek mythology, the serpent, he who sees and awaits, is associated with Asclepius, the physician, like I just said, who is Ophiuchus. It's the same dude. The physician and healer and son of Apollo, the sun god. Shrines and temples of healing. So I've said this before in a video, but I'm going to say it again. So we have Ophiuchus is the son of Apollo. Apollo is a sun god. He is part of a twin. He represents the sun, and his sister Artemis represents the moon. So he is a polarized part of a partnership, right? He represents the light, the masculine part of that partnership. His son, however, Ophiuchus, represents that same solar masculine consciousness, but integrating back with the unconscious, integrating back with the feminine, and becoming a healer in the process because he integrates the serpent. He tames the serpent, right? The Ophiuchus constellation in the sky. So not only do we have Draco, right, which is circling the celestial pole and guarding the axis mundi, guarding the opposition between the pole star and the galactic center, guarding the world tree that has its roots in heaven at the peak light, right, of the summer solstice, and its branches in heaven in the peak light of the summer solstice, which aligns with the point, and then the pole star, and then it has its roots in the peak darkness of the winter solstice, which is connected to the galactic center, rooted down there in the sky, right? And that is guarded by Draco, the constellation that has almost a star in every single sign because it circles the celestial pole up top, and it guards this sort of world tree, this axis mundi, our peak periods of extreme polarity that are seeking balance and harmony. And Ophiuchus sits at that galactic center. He sits on the axis mundi. He has his foot on the galactic center. He's taming the serpent, and then together, actually it's the serpent because the serpent's the only one who can reach. Ophiuchus can't reach on his own. The serpent, now tamed, reaches for the Corona Borealis, which is the crown constellation. Yes, it's named Corona. Yes, I do think this virus is attacking our crown chakra. But the serpent reaches for the crown at the same time that he unlocks the galactic center. So we see this sort of iconography juxtaposed on the sky in several different places. But his Apollo represents that solar consciousness, and his sun represents that solar consciousness on its way back to balance and harmony and the path of integrating the serpent that his father severed, because his father was responsible for severing the connection to Gaia. The Temple of Delphi in Greece, which is attributed to Apollo, and where the Vestal Virgins and the Delphic priestesses reside, channeling for Apollo. That used to be the temple of Gaia, and Apollo stole it after he killed her serpent and severed the connection to the mother goddess. So his son represents the karma of the reintegration. So that was just a little tangent there. Okay, so in Greek mythology, the serpent watch my if you haven't watched my Ophiuchus rabbit hole and my Axis Mundi video, they are both here on YouTube, and I go into all of that stuff that I was just talking about, and what I just said will make a lot more sense with like my graphics and all that. Okay, in Greek mythology, the serpent, quote, he who sees and waits, is associated with Asclepius or Ophiuchus, the physician and healer and son of Apollo. Shrines and temples of healing, known as Asclepia, were built throughout Greece along the shores of the Aegean Sea. Here, the sick would come to worship and seek for cures. The most renowned was the sanctuary of Asclepius at Epirus, which flourished from 600 BC down to 400 AD. At its peak, the cult of Asclepius was the most successful in history in that part of the world to fuse religion, magic, nature care, diet, rest, massage, hydrotherapy into the service of healing. Ancient Central and South American Indian civilizations named their medicine man, magicians, or initiates Nagals, as did the Chaldeans. In Bulgaria, the word Nagal means chief, a teacher, and a serpent. The Nagals were known, it seems, to the ancient Aryans, and the Sanskrit word for the South American Nagal is Uragas. There are legends about the Nagas being the ancestors of the Naragas, whose homeland was I have literally no idea how to say this word. Bulgaria? I have no idea. I have no idea even where this country is. Uruguay. Uruguay? I have no idea. In Mexico, the word becomes Nagul, so they add like a U to it. Quetzalcoatl, the Mexican plumed serpent god, instructor of the populace, came accompanied by builders, painters, astronomers, etc. He built roads, civilized the people, and departed across the sea, a magic raft of serpents. Mexican tribes associated with the myth of the plumed serpent came from the city of Toulon. It is significant that they were known as Tararians. I'm going to spell this too, and mostly for you, Amanda. Tarianas. And I underlined it because even when I read this before, I was like, that sounds like this whole Tartarian freaking rabbit hole. I don't know anything about that. But I'm open to it when I feel like I could dive in. Okay. This is a title closely resembling that. What? It is significant that they are known as Tararians, a title closely resembling that given to the tribes of Turania in Turkestan, who were associated with the serpent, the Tarians, Taryans. The Mayas, Aztecs, and Toltecs attributed the source of all light spiritual and mental to the great serpent. In keeping with the Christian Bible, where knowledge due to the serpent was obtained, Humboldt, Humboldt, the German naturalist and explorer, states, the hieroglyphs, cosmological monuments, and institutions of the people of Central and South America prove indisputably the existence of communication between America and India. Yeah, Atlantis. The numerous myths relative to the founders of the American Indian civilizations make reference to great teachers who arrived from the East, and the word serpent invariably appears in connection with their presence. And many of them speak to a flood in the past, and these teachers taking them into like cave systems ultimately to like survive cataclysms underground, and then rising up out of the ground. The Hopi speak to this, rising up out of the ground to like rebuild. Okay. I can't remember if I read this one right here, so I guess we'll just read this. The numerous myths relative to the founders of the American Indian civilizations, I did read it, make reference to great teachers who arrived from the East, and the word serpent invariably appears in connection with their presence. The esoteric tradition places the Nagas as descendants of the prehistoric race whose homeland was destroyed by a great cataclysm 10,000 years ago. Okay, he got there. An ancient papyrus in the Leningard Hermitage mentions the, quote, island of serpents, probably Atlantis, and it contains the following passage. After you leave my island, you will not find it again, and this place will vanish under the sea waves. The actual existence of that civilization, the Vedic Aryan, is now accepted in the light of the new archaeological revelations. The Harappan civilization of the Indus Valley has also provided evidence of highly advanced technology, city planning, social structure, commerce, and maritime activity dating back to 4000 BC. Called Malhua by the ancient Sumerians, it appears that the civilization arrived intact from across the sea, from Atlantis. It is also known that the Indus Valley civilization was far more extensive than formerly realized, embracing areas as far away as Oxus River, now called Amu Dara in Central Asia, and forming part of the Soviet-Afghanistan border on its course. Turanian was a region just north of the Oxus. In the Tigris expedition, Theradol, I know I'm messing that one wrong, but can't say German either, writes, in reasoning or inventiveness, little has been gained or lost in the buildup of the human species during the last millennia. A visitor to Mohenjo-Daro, one of the Indus Valley sites, will be left with the impression that the city, with all it contains, had either in recorded time surpassed all other human generations in inventiveness, or, like that of the Aryans, they were immigrants, bringing with them centuries of cultural inheritance. The mystery of the Indus Valley civilization is not so much why it disappeared, but how it began, but also how it disappeared, because it has evidence of like nuclear catastrophe and like radiation and stuff in Mohenjo-Daro. But I don't know if they discovered that yet when he wrote this book. Okay. It is the race of, quote, wise serpents, whose totem was the hooded cobra found inscribed on the soapstone seals of the Indus Valley, who are the Nagas of Indian philosophy. And that is why the cobra, known as Nag or Naga, has been raised throughout the country to the rank of a divine being. This next part is called the serpent as metaphor. The sign of the serpent is derived from the spiraling motion of all energy, beginning with the primal formative process which spawned our galaxy and solar system, as seen in the configuration of a spiral nebula and reflected in the formation of seashells and flowers, in the nature of the flow of energy in an electrical current in the human body, in the double helix of the DNA molecule, the transmitter of genetic information throughout a physical entity. In Hinduism, the cosmic serpent, Ahatna Shisha, symbolic of timeless eternity, carries the world on its thousandfold hood as he rests between creative periods. The Hindus believe that the universe is periodically created and dissolved. As the creative impulse stirs within the great serpent in the sky, when passive ideas become active thought, the forces of attraction and repulsion come into play as spirit begins its evolution into matter. Universal energy is a consequence of this interplay of forces. What science labels as electromagnetism and gravity is still unable to explain in materialistic terms are merely effects of the movement of this dynamic yet subtle universal energy which pervades all space, all of the creative universe. The hood... I'm trying not to bend this book, and it's so hard. I already wrote all over it, but I never get rid of my books, so I don't care. I'm not going to try to sell this book. I tried to read it without writing in it because it is out of print, and I did pay a pretty penny for it, and it was literally impossible. I couldn't retain any information, so finally I gave up and I just wrote in it. But I am trying not to bend the cover, which is really hard for me to do. Where are my glasses? This fan is drying out my eyes so bad, and I thought I had... Oh, here they are. Okay. The hooded cobra, depicted in a coiled or undulating position, is symbolic of the spiraling, vortex-like pattern of movement, of universal energy as it permeates matter and proceeds to nourish it. It is also symbolic of the essential nature of that life force energy, which is identified as pure consciousness. Hindu seers named the energy as Shakti, the all-pervading, formative energy of the gods. Sakti. Each god or governor of this force of nature has his own Shakti, or consort, which is understood as the expression of God. Shakti is thus female or feminine, a life-giving, nurturing, non-aggressive, loving force. And if Western science is ever able to grasp the fact that human consciousness is an attribute of that same energy and not the result of physical biometrical reactions, it could dispel the ever-increasing aggression, personal greed, and psychosis that is pervading our present society like a cancer. So he says that in the Hindu tradition, Shakti, but it doesn't have an H, so I think I'm saying it wrong, is known as the all-pervading formative energy of the gods. And it's innately feminine. It's that primordial energy, right? And each god or governor, because the Vedic tradition is very patriarchal in nature, they're all the masculine archetypes. And then they have their sort of Shakti, they have their all-pervading force represented as their consort, as their feminine consort. Okay. In the human biological system, universal energy is known as Kundalini Sakti. And because of its presence, we are able to exist as conscious, self-aware human beings. How we use this life force energy via our mental faculties for constructive or destructive purposes determines our degree of intelligence or stupidity. Kundalini Sakti can be amplified by controlled breathing techniques along with meditative disciplines. In an amplified state, it is generally referred to as expanded consciousness, a condition that allows us to process through our nervous system information from the environment, which during a normal state of consciousness is totally inaccessible. The hooded cobra, when erect, is symbolic of amplified Kundalini Shakti, the serpent force. The god Shiva, who represents in his higher aspect universal intelligence and in his lower aspect metamorphosis. I wrote here, metamorphosis and metamorphosis into what? It can be something completely inorganic, which is something that I think is probably happening through technologies like CERN and nanotechnology and whatnot, which we see the Shiva archetype strongly connected to as well. So in its higher, everything is dual, right? So in its higher manifestation, it represents the higher aspect of universal intelligence, the destruction of ignorance and ultimate enlightenment. But in its lower aspect, it represents metamorphosis, as well as renewal, regeneration. Governs these principles relating to the creative and disillusionary process in nature. And that is why God's image is always depicted with a cobra adorning his person. This God's image is always depicted with a cobra adorning his person. To the yogis, he is venerated as the king of serpents. I don't think so. He's the king of serpents, the possessor of the ultimate wisdom, the great guru. At the social level, he is the father of fertility, procreation, and regeneration. Okay, still think there should be a woman and not just a consort, but whatever. The idea of gods as metaphors for the principles underlying the forces of nature was central to the abstract nature of the Indian mind and embedded with philosophy and mythology, with lyricism and beauty foreign to our 20th century sensibilities. The inference to the serpent representing universal energy is clearly presented in the following extract from the Ardhra Veda. From the Vedas. Homage to the snakes which never move around the earth and are in the sky and heaven. Homage to the snakes which are in the arrows of magicians and the tree spirits which lie in the holes. Homage to those snakes which are the brightness of heaven, which are the rays of the sun, which have made their abode in the waters. This next section is called the serpent as a fertility symbol. I'm just looking at my notes that I wrote over here. Something about precession. Okay. Let me see how much is left in this chapter. Okay, I think we can finish it tonight. We'll see. The serpent as a fertility symbol. A common sight throughout the rural areas of South India, occurring sometimes at the entrance to a village or town near Shiva temples and shrines, in the corner of a temple courtyard near a water tank or a stream, water being the mother of life, or most often under peepal or neem trees, is a cluster of erect stones or slabs, planted in the ground, rising to about 3 feet in height, on the face of which appear effigies of the cobra or the Nag. In relation to the aforementioned trees, generally married to each other, they are symbolic of life, with the serpent representing their spirit or life energy, which again, it speaks about sort of like axis mundi, world tree, right? And the sort of like uniting of duality that those mythologies represent, and the serpent being that which unites, right? That consciousness that travels into the unconscious and the conscious realm and unites the two. Okay, the stone slabs are known as Naga coils and are mostly placed there by childless wives who vow to install a snake stone if they are blessed with offspring. Probably the greatest desire of the average female Indian mentality. Various rituals complement the desire. It is one belief, for example, that a woman will obtain children if she walks around the sacred tree 108 times daily for 48 consecutive days. I wrote here that 108 is a very significant number. We see it used on malas, and it's a precession number. It's tied to the precession of the equinoxes, and it's rooted in a lot of ancient sacred texts, the number 108. And it's, I believe, and not just me, other people have said this, that number 108 is rooted into these sacred texts because it holds this like mathematical connection to the precession of the equinoxes and the stars moving around the 26,000-year cycle, which moves around the axis mundi, the world tree, the polar pillar, the pole star. It rotates around that, right? And so I wrote here, it's interesting that they have her walking 108 times around a sacred tree for 48 consecutive days. This seems like a ritual tied to that sort of polar pillar mythology and the serpent and the world tree that are all connected. Okay. They say that this action of walking around the sacred tree is an invocation to the Queen of Serpents, the royal Nagini, whose name may vary from state to state through the land. For instance, she is most popularly known as Monsiah. The compound number 9, which I wrote here, is my life path number. You get your life path number by adding together all of the numbers in your birthday, so like all of the numbers of the day, the month, the day, the year, and then you like condense it down, right? So let's say like whatever it is adds up to 12. You would then add 2 and 1 together and get 3, and that's your life path. Unless, of course, yes, Zephyr says 108 mala beads, exactly. What was I saying? Oh my gosh. Oh, the life path number. So whichever number you get. So unless, of course, it adds to what they call a master number, which is 11 or 22 or 33. Those supposedly have their own interpretations as well. Mine is 9, which is the culmination. And it also is connected to the spiral as well, which I find interesting. Hi, Zephyr. Okay, so the compound number 9 is apparent in the circumambulatory ritual, circling around a tree ritual. And in esoteric numerology, the number 9 signifies completion or unity with the forces of nature. At many Shiva temples and Cobra shrines, women are often seen in prayer or receiving the blessings of the attending priest. Small gifts of fruit or flowers are offered to the deity. The nearby Naga coils act not only as testaments to the fact that the devotees' prayers have been answered, but as tributes to the serpent goddess. The king cobra, or Hamadyrad, is the largest of the poisonous snakes. This sometimes 15-foot-long lethal creature is entirely a snake eater. It enjoys pythons, other cobras, and even its own species. The king is aggressive, unpredictable, and can strike without provocation. It is most intelligent. When erect, it can stand up to 5 feet in height. In certain fertility rites in Bruma, a woman desirous of offspring is required not only to approach the king cobra, but to plant a kiss on its mouth. If she is successful in doing so, she will bear many children. If she fails, obviously none. Throughout the southern and western parts of India, the live snake itself is also the object of veneration, and at a multitude of cobra shrines and in temples it is fed on milk, sweet meats, sugar, etc., nurtured and worshipped as being the bodily vehicle of that higher cosmic power or spirit which is to be approached with reverence and honored. In the state of Kerala, on the Malabar coast, it is popularly considered good fortune to have a cobra living in the garden patch of undergrowth, preferably under a tree. Always a tree. Snakes and trees, man. Preferably under a tree, is cultivated and preserved for the snake. It will be fed and attended accordingly. To harm or kill a cobra is considered sacrilegious by many people, and such an act can only bring misfortune. The cobra, normally a non-aggressive animal, is widely known Malabar. Yeah, I know I'm pronouncing like a lot of these things wrong. So the cobra is widely known as the good snake. In the northern states, it is essentially the image of the serpent that is worshipped. This next section is entitled The Serpent as the Metaphysical Serpent. Probably read this one, and then we'll maybe... Okay. The Metaphysical Serpent. Cobra effigies and icons are in most part multicephalous, that it possesses 3, 5, 7, or sometimes 9 heads. We see this in Greek mythology a lot. Always an odd number, though. Yeah, I guess it is always an odd number. Certain images are anthropomorphic, showing a human head on a body of a snake, and others represent a naga, often sitting in a lotus or a meditative position, with a multi-headed cobra forming a canopy over the figure's head. Cobras are constantly depicted intertwined in a double helix. The female head, often seen on a serpent's body, depicts a Nagini, or a female Naga. The attendants of the Naga royalty also possess only one head. These variations appear cryptic to most Westerners and require some explanation. The multiple heads relate once again to certain fundamental principles and functions concerning natural processes upon which the universe is created and maintained, and which underlie all our experience. When we see over the head of a Naga, and they designate his rank or position within the Naga hierarchy, depending upon his degree of spiritual attainment. So this part is about the 3 heads. 3 heads represent the law of 3, relative to most esoteric teachings and ancient philosophies throughout the world. These 3 laws or principles relate to creation, preservation, or sustenance, and dissolution or destruction, which represent themselves in a cycle and apply to all existing phenomenon. The gods who govern these principles are named Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver or the sustainer, and Shiva, the destroyer. The form of the Trinity, or in Hinduism, it's like their word for Trinity. In the physical sense, birth, survival, and death are irrefutable realities of existence. The ancient Egyptian trinity was named Osiris, Isis, Horus. And in the Christian faith, we had the Father, Mother, or the Holy Ghost, and the Son, Jesus of Nazareth, being the destroyer of ignorance. So in the Vedic tradition, they are all men with feminine consorts. And in the preceding traditions, two are men, one being a mother consort and a mother. Okay. In the psychological sense, creation of any sort can occur only in the face of commiserate opposition. I circled this one a lot. This paragraph's really good. I was going to type this and put this on my post today for the video, but I didn't get around to it. Them kitties are keeping me busy. Okay. In the psychological sense, creation of any sort can occur only in the face of opposition. And a balance or a reconciliation must be established between two forces in order that the idea may become an actuality and be sustained. For example, male and female is not a relationship. There must exist love or desire to actualize and sustain a relationship. A composer in a sheet of musical manuscript will not produce a musical score. There must be inspiration. A business deal cannot be closed without a mutual agreement. In physics, the three principles become transposed in the concept of proton, neutron, and electron, forces consisting of the nature of every atom. Okay, the 5 heads. So we were talking about 3 heads before. Now we're talking about the 5 heads. So the 5-headed serpent, metaphysically speaking, represents potentiality and the desire towards idealism. The symbol for the star is drawn with 5 points, the pentagram, right? The ideal of the initiate is to become a star or one with the gods, to achieve union with the natural forces which created him or her. It's actually one of Crowley's favorite lines. Every man or woman is a star, right? Psychologically, the male-female union as a result of the law of 3 is, by nature, extended to include in additional considerations which become more complex as the functioning of the relationship changes. The original love or desire, emotion, etc., is sublimated towards a more balanced ideology which embraces family, security, ambition, and the future realization of partners' potentials. 7 heads represents the 7 stages of evolutionary growth towards the ideal of self-perfection. Growth is not a continuous process. Throughout nature, completion arrives via 7 plateaus of progress. The significance of the 7-hooded cobra is most clear when related to the discipline of Kundalini yoga and the 7 levels of consciousness leading to samadhi or liberation. I have an issue with most of the Kundalini yoga here in the States because of who it originated from and him being a total sexual predator of the worst kind, and it being a fixed doctrine that you can't change. But Kundalini yoga itself originated over in the East, and it is much more ancient than that fucking guy. But just a word of advice, most of the stuff over here, just look into its source. People always get really mad when I say this, though. Okay. levels of consciousness. The yoga helps you move up the levels of consciousness, okay? The enlightenment of the Buddha is represented with a 7-hooded Naga in a protective attitude towards forming a shield over the head of the Savior. Nikita says, thank you for sharing this with us. What a gem. Oh, you're welcome. Zephyr is doing math. Okay, hold on. Zephyr. 136, which is 136, which is 30. I cannot. Mercury is retrograde. I cannot process any of what that is. Okay, so psychologically, math is not my thing. And I think that math is not my thing so that the amount of puzzles my brain finds is limited, because I think if I was well versed in math, like, I would just be perpetually in a rabbit hole of never-ending puzzles. So I think I was gifted with a inability to process math. Even though I dig it and I do like numerology and numbers and like the esoteric mathematics, you know, I just really, really, really suck at it. Okay, psychologically. 7 relates to, but I was really, so I failed math miserably in school all the time. Even when I would have like straight A's later when I got good at school. Early school was really hard, but when I got older, I was good at school. And I would have straight A's, but like an F in math. I would always have to go to summer school. That's where I met all the bad kids. That's where I got in trouble. But then all of a sudden, in like 10th grade, when you have geometry, then I was like, oh, this shit makes sense. And I had an A in geometry, and I was really, really good at geometry, and I really, really liked geometry. And now it makes sense because I'm an astrologer, and I have to use geometry every single day for the angles. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's probably why my soul was like, oh, this is cool, we'll learn this. Okay, psychologically, 7 relates to the realization of our potentialities, success in our chosen endeavors. The 9 heads represents finality, fulfillment, and unity with the forces of nature. The number applied to the fully initiated, to the seer. My life path. Wouldn't say I'm fully initiated. Abstracts of math like Kabbalah are very intuitive though, like geometry, yeah. She says math is not her thing either. Okay. So 9 is the number of the fully initiated, of the seer. Psychologically, it would apply to a life completely expressed without regrets and with all guilts erased, a difficult number to resonate with in our present type of society. Yeah. The entwined serpents represent... Oh, no, it doesn't say represent. The entwined serpents, which gave birth to the symbol of the medical profession, the caduceus, later became the Greek mythology of the staff of Hermes, the messenger of the gods, Mercury, who's currently retrograde, making my brain not work. But honestly, I use my brain too much. Mercury's like, you need to chill and go within and stop the turning of the wheels. Okay, anyway. Where were we at? Mercury was doing something. Okay, so the caduceus later became in Greek mythology the staff of Hermes, or Mercury, the messenger of the gods. The 2 serpents in a double helix around the central rod are known in yogic terms as Ida, which is related to the moon, the female or negative polarity, which is magnetic in nature, and the Pingala, related to the sun, the male, the positive polarity, which is electric in nature. They represent 2 of the major nadis, or conduits, through which polarized bioenergy, life force, Kundalini, or the serpent force, is normally conducted throughout the biophysical system. The 7 chakras, or energy vortex centers, are interconnected, each chakra being responsible for the distribution of life energy received from the environment via the energy body or causal body to the respective organ of the endocrine system. She says, I love Mercury retrograde. I have Mercury and Virgo in my birth chart, though. I am Virgo rising, so Mercury is my chart ruler. I have my Mars there, too. And I have some Gemini placements as well. I love Mercury retrograde, too, when it's over, and I can see what it did for me and what it showed me. But during it, I very much do not love all of the fucking tech problems and issues, because it is just nonstop over here. Between Mercury being my chart ruler, Eddie being a Gemini, so it governs him very strongly. It's one thing after another. Like the second Mercury went retrograde and we went to bed or whatever, he woke me up at 6 o'clock in the morning like, oh my gosh, what the heck? Because he stepped in 2 inches of water. Our entire bathroom flooded, and he's like, what the heck, where is this coming from? He's like trying to clean it up, and it just keeps coming, and it's coming out of the wall because the neighbor's pipe broke. And so we've been like dealing with all of that. Then today his battery just died in his car, so he had to go buy a new battery. It's like one thing after another during Mercury retrograde. So I do not like all of those things, but I know that those things just irritate me to the point where I'm like, fine, I'll go within. And then once I do, I can navigate it properly. And on the other side, I'm always very grateful for the retrograde, because I'm like, oh, I see the message I missed. I see what came through. I see why this happened, blah, blah, blah. But like in the thick of it, it's super annoying because it really does mess with like my ability to process information so much. Yeah. Okay. Where were we? Okay, manifesting. So we're talking about the entwined serpent and how it's connected to the chakra system, right? So manifesting 7 different frequencies, life energy is directly related to the 7 bands of light that constitute the composition of pure white light, the rainbow, right? Seen by our senses in the form of the rainbow. The term rainbow body is often heard to describe the principle. I wrote here on the side that what I'm about to read is symbolic of the axis mundi and that like middle pillar, world tree, middle path that you guys hear me talk about all the time. Okay, so the central rod, that axis mundi, that middle pillar, right? The central rod is known as the Shushmana, and it corresponds to the spinal column. Each serpent or conduit conducts its respective energy to form the human electromagnetic energy flow. You know, these are like the meridians, right? We talk about these like dragon lines that are ley lines on the earth, and then we have them within our body. That's what acupuncture taps into too. These sort of like energy lines. They're literally about to say acupuncture too. I always jump the gun. Oh my gosh, Allie, just sit still. Okay, so each serpent or conduit conducts its respective energy to form the human electromagnetic energy flow. It is the maintenance of balance between these 2 energy flows, like the yin and the yang, that underlies the principles of Indian Ayurvedic medicine, acupuncture, and holistic health in general, and in particular Kundalini yoga, which is explained below. 2 wings appear at the top of the caduceus of the intertwined serpents. These are respective of the intellectual and intuitive cognitive faculties, which bilaterally balanced mental and physical well-being is a result. The orb at the top of the rod symbolizes the ideal condition. I would say that it's also kind of symbolizing of that axis mundi, that pole star, right? That which is at the top of the mystic mountain, of the polar pillar, that all the mythologies speak about. Representative of that like fear, that sphere and the pole. Okay, so now we're going to read this chapter on this section on Kundalini yoga, even though I don't trust any of the Kundalini yoga over here in the West, but I'm still going to read it. Okay. Kundalini yoga. The aim of Kundalini Yoga is to intercept the normal oscillation of polarized life energy by the practice of controlled breathing, and to close down these two channels, forcing the life energy into the Brahmanadi, the hair-thin central duct that's situated within the Sushumna Kundalini. Thus aroused, the life energy ascends along the Brahma Nadi to the head. Each chakra subjected to the flow is vivified. Its activity as a distributor intensified. A dynamic transformation of consciousness is the result. I had my Kundalini awakening was sudden and abrupt and brought on by just my existence. Oh my gosh, I was so not ready for that. I haven't done any Kundalini yoga, but I know many people who went and got certified in it, and I have done much research on the origins of it here in the West, but I don't practice it myself. The objective reality of such an energy distribution system is thoroughly documented by Dr. Harshimi Matamoya of Tokyo, who has spent 30 years researching the subject of bioenergy. I'm pretty sure he's the guy who did the water experiments where he shows the like zoomed in water crystals when, you know, they have these sort of intentions placed upon them, like happy versus like hatred type of a thing, and like prayer of like Buddhist monks. Hi from Chicago. Oh my gosh, what time is it in Chicago? It is 11:10 right now, about to be 11:11 in LA over here on the West Coast. I can't imagine what time it is in Chicago, but hi. It's like a distributor cap with smart plugs for the mechanically inclined. This? Oh, I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know. Okay, let's move on. We're talking about the Kundalini Yoga. Okay, so the objective reality of such... Oh, this Motomoto guy, or whatever. I know I'm ruining his name. But yeah, I think he does the water experiments. But apparently he's been researching the subject of bioenergy, and from the results of tests conducted over a 15-year period, qualifies his work in these words. The chakra nadi system bears striking resemblance to the layout of the autonomic nervous system. This is remarkable in that the yogic model was developed before the... I know I'm messing this word up, but I know it's like something like anatomical. Oh my god. I'm just going to say the constituents of anatomy, because that's literally what it's trying to say. And of the nervous system were understood. Before anatomy and the workings of the nervous system were understood, but like he used some words that my mouth can't say. Oh yes, it must be late there. But yes, I like it when you guys are here live. Okay, so they're understanding anatomy and the nervous system, right? The Sushumna seems to be in the exact place occupied by the spinal cord and the Ida and the Pignala. The left and the right, the yin and the yang, right? They are similarly located along the main sympathetic nerves. Each chakra appears to have a corresponding nerve plexus, a bundle of nerve tissue, which controls respective areas of the body and the internal organs they contain. Oh, Zephyr, you always help me with this. Autonomical. Did I get that? Okay. Western medical psychology has endeavored to link acupuncture with the human nervous system. Dr. Motoyama states, however, that the acupuncture meridians and the physical nervous system do not coincide positionally. they are independent of each other, he summarizes. I got it. Good looking out, Zephyr. Good looking out. Okay. We have proved conclusively that the human is more than a body and a limited intellect. He possesses non-physical properties and energies that are still largely unknown and uncharted by traditional science. Man has 3 bodies, the physical, the astral, and the casual, which overlie and interpenetrate each other. Each level of the human entity's 3 beings is sustained by the energy of that dimension. More refined matter is to be found in the higher dimensions. Physical tools can only measure physical objects. Modern science is therefore unable to detect or evaluate non-physical energies. The forces that we are dealing with are far removed from what we regard as the material world, that they will completely revolutionize physics and philosophy and bring about a profound change in humanity's perception of reality. My great hope is that we shall gain a deeper knowledge of who we are and how we are related to the universe, and that this knowledge will further the evolutionary progression of our collective consciousness. Dr. Motoyama holds PhD degrees in philosophy and clinical psychology. I have this thing for my back, but it's hurting me. I need to move. Okay. He holds degrees in philosophy and clinical psychology. He is both a scientist trained in empirical methodology and a serious yogi. I'm sure you can say this as together, but it's a bunch of letters and it stands for something, you know? The UNESCO, maybe that's how they say it, for short, selected him in 1974 as one of the world's 10 foremost researchers in parapsychology. UNESCO. I wonder what that stands for. The ancient metaphysics of Indian serpent lore co-relate to the latest understandings in advanced research in physics, biochemistry, biology, and parapsychology. Photographic evidence confirming the existence of acupuncture meridians corresponding to the ancient traditional model has recently been obtained by a research team at the Necker Hospital in Paris, France. Garada and the Serpent is the next section. What time is it? 11. Okay. We'll read this last section and then we'll call it there. This first chapter is really long. So we'll read this mythology of Garada and the Serpent. First I want to show you guys this page here. It has the same picture as the cover. I'll read what it says over here right now. So it says, see how it's like a pole, like the axis mundi or the world tree, a polar pillar, guarded by the serpent in a circle. It speaks very heavily. For those of you that have watched those videos that I've been mentioning, you'll see the symbolism there. In an ancient, hold on. It's dripping everywhere. Okay. An ancient Hindu amulet and talisman is known as the sign of the initiate. It's so funny because I had tied this this is just a line, but it makes a cross when you make it with the serpent. But I had tied that symbolism, the cross and the serpent, to Atlantis so long ago, when I was still new to some of these rabbit holes. So to see it in this book, I'm see, I know I was onto something. Okay. The sign of the initiate. The circle represents the infinite universe. The border of triangles symbolizes the 3 universal principles governing the cyclic process of nature, and known as the Trinity, or the Law of 3, that is, creation, preservation, and dissolution. The 7 knotted bamboo represents the law of 7. There exists 7 levels of consciousness to be obtained by an initiate. 7 energy centers or chakras distributed vital energy throughout the human biophysical system. 7 stages of growth occur during the life cycle. Light consists of 7 primary colors or light frequencies. The number is highly significant in esoteric teachings. The serpent is the aspect of symbolic of the universal creative energy or life force manifesting in man as consciousness. There's also 7 planets that we can see with our eye. We need from here to Saturn being the 7th. Uranus, which I talked about earlier, we discovered we needed to develop the microscope. I always say that. The telescope to discover Uranus and Neptune and Pluto and the asteroids and Eris and black holes and so many other things. We needed to develop our progressive engineering mind that Uranus represents. It also represents just technology, technological advancements. And that represents that sort of like 8th sphere, right? So I've said this before, Steiner talks about the 8th sphere. A lot of occultists talk about the 8th, not a lot, a couple occultists talk about the 8th sphere. And over here in my videos, we've talked about it a lot. This sort of like technological outer sphere. And I have floated the idea that Uranus governs the 8th sphere because Uranus governs electricity. Uranus governs technology. Uranus literally is the 8th sphere. We have the 7 controlling archons, the like 7 deities, the planets we can see with our eye that all of the ancients knew about, right? These 7 layers. And then we have this 8th layer that we are building. Uranus represents technology, yes. Advancements in science, yes. The 8th sphere, like all of these, technological advancements that are being used to control society. But it also represents awakening and enlightenment. And the other side of that, which is something that's very much going to be happening during the age of Aquarius, which Uranus governs Aquarius. It's the ruling planet of Aquarius. We're going to have this dualistic nature. Aquarius is dualistic. We have those 2 waves, right? We have those 2 electrical currents, and we have those 2 manifestations happening simultaneously. These extreme progressive push forward. Yes, Gigi talks about it too. These extreme aggressive push forward in the scientific materialist mindset and technology while simultaneously the awakening process. Okay, I don't know if I want to share this. I had this very dark realization. I don't know if I want to share this, but I think I will. Well, if you guys are the type to be here, what is this, like 2.5 hours into me, we'll save the rest later. We'll end this here. If you're here to be like 2.5 hours into me reading a book, I guess maybe you can probably handle my very dark realization. Okay, so I was thinking, it's pretty dark. Okay, so I was thinking, okay, we have this transhumanist agenda taking hold that we cannot stop. Like, it's already here. Like, people are already filled themselves with this nanotechnology. Like, AI is here. Like, it's all here. The 5G, it's here. If Elon Musk tomorrow was like, yo, the brain-computer interface is done, come and get your Neuralink and hook up to the internet. Like, the lines would be just as long as they are for the new iPhone. People want this. We can't stop it, right? And so then I started thinking about how, well, with huge advancements in gene altering and nanotechnology and whatnot, like, that is building a human 2.0, right? So the natural humans, us here, we are kind of an endangered species now. The vast majority is going to go that way, right? we are kind of an endangered species now. So then I started thinking, okay, so we are all part of a collective consciousness, right? So regardless of how many people are alive on Earth, we are all part of a collective consciousness. So like in theory, back when there were less humans on the planet, the collective consciousness was still just as big. We were tapping into just as much, but those people probably had access to more of that consciousness because there was less people on the planet. So they could embody more of it, right? And so I started thinking about how like there's going to be mass deaths. And these people are going to be sucked into this illusionary consciousness, and so they aren't going to be using so much of the collective consciousness because they're going to be sucked into this sort of like Borg hive mind type scenario. And so I started thinking about the dark crystal and how like in the 1982 film, like all of the Gelflings are dead. And there's just like one left. Well, then it ends up being two. It's that union of the two, the divine masculine and the divine feminine together, that are the ones that like unite the crystal and unite the Skeksis and the gentle mystics back together into the being that they were, that split, the Urskis, I think they're called. And I started thinking about how perhaps, this is so dark, perhaps the awakening is happening simultaneously along this development of transhumanism, and they are going to merge with like the singularity of AI, and simultaneously as the extinct, with the endangered human population, which we will be when everybody gets so sucked into the New World Order. We're going to be living in like offshoot communities, and we are going to be on the fringes of society. As those numbers dwindle and they are sucked into an artificial consciousness, these people have more access to the collective consciousness, and they can embody more of it. And perhaps as they get sucked into a technological singularity, we are connecting to the singularity, like source consciousness, and perhaps it ends when there's just one human left and they are the singularity of the collective consciousness. That's what happens when I smoke too much weed. It gets dark, but I was thinking like, we're not going to be able to stop what's happening, right? But the manifestation of that Uranian Aquarian energy is twofold. So it will not be just one. It will not be just a technological dystopian society, because that is only one side of that polarity. It has to manifest as both. I hope it has a better ending than what I just painted for you, but that's something that I have been thinking of lately. Like, you know, back in Atlantean times, when we were supposedly so much more enlightened and magical and connected to our natural innate abilities, there were less people on the planet, and so, you know, what is the collective Gaian Earth consciousness wasn't any less, you know, but people just had more connection to it. And so while people are sucked into this like matrix, hive mind, AI consciousness, I think there's like more of the collective consciousness for us to embody, if that makes sense. I don't know. Maybe I should have kept this one to myself. Alright guys, so we didn't get too far into this book, but that's because I ramble a lot. We literally only got to page 26. But this book has like, it's broken up pretty good to where like, you know, we can pick back up later. So next we're going to pick up on Garuda and the serpent. Garuda is the eagle. And you see that like depiction of the bird and the serpent a lot in ancient mythology. So we're going to pick up on the mythology of that. We'll touch a little bit more on some more of the serpent stuff, and then next time we'll get into the sign of the swastika, if I didn't lose everybody with my very dark A projection into the future. I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen, but I definitely know we will not be able to stop the vast majority of people plugging themselves into the motherfucking Borg. That shit is going to happen, and we can't stop it. So we have to keep trying to embody balanced union within ourselves, and so that we can pass our karmic lessons in this incarnation, so that we don't have to incarnate here with whatever trajectory they're going, and perhaps we get to go to a parallel realm or another planet or somewhere where people aren't turning themselves into literal cyborgs. I don't have the answers. Nobody fucking does. Okay, let's see what you guys are saying. Everybody's saying, no, we like listening to what you have to say. She says, LOL, it's mind-blowing. I am a snake in Chinese astrology and the blue solar eagle in Mayan. There you go. You got that balance. Alright, guys, I know we didn't get too far in, and I rambled a lot about like how I feel about this book and whatnot and so many tangents, but this will be the book we're in until we're done. And yeah, I was considering doing another one this month, but my birthday's at the end of the month, and I have a shit ton of sessions this month. Thank you to everybody who's been ordering so many sessions. I am super booked this month. I am still booking for next month, though. I have a bunch of openings for next month, so if you guys want to book a session for me for October, it's linked below. But I think I'll wait till next month to dive back into this book, so we'll do another session next month. And yes, we meet on the 21st, which is the first day of Mabon, the day before the equinox. We meet over on Patreon to dive into the chart of the Libra new moon, which is exact on the 25th and is conjunct the supergalactic center. It's like right on top of my sun and the supergalactic center. So that is a really, really big, powerful, cosmically powerful moon. And if you guys want to come and join in on the fun, you can join Patreon. It's also linked down below. You guys have heard me say before, it's a sliding scale. You can just pay whatever you want. Just pay whatever you want, and you will have access to all the videos. There's tiers as low as like $3 a month. All of the videos are unlocked for everybody. Just, times are tough, man. Times are tough for all of us, and I want to find ways to be able to like support myself, but also, give back to the collective. So Patreon is really the only place that I can do that right now. Hopefully I'm going to work to getting like some sort of like the YouTube membership thing made, put together or whatever. They keep telling me about it, but I'm not tech savvy, you guys. I really, really, really hate computers. Like, I really fucking hate them, and they're really hard, and I don't like doing all the stuff. So I'll get around to it eventually. And I'm also working on getting a course planned for sometime in the next year, where I'm going to be walking you guys through how to kind of find all these points that I use, kind of like how to do a starseed chart, how to map the fixed stars, how to find these points, and kind of like my philosophy about it, and so that other people can start to do the kind of astrology that I have seemed to gravitate towards. So I don't know exactly when that's going to be launched, but I've had many people ask me because I do have it like on my website, like course coming, but like that was like grandiose thinking, like, yeah, it's coming, but like when it will be here, I have no idea. But yeah, we meet on the 21st to go over the moon. If you guys want to join us, it's linked below. And thank you so much for being here with me late. I appreciate it, being able to like do my favorite things. Just like read books, talk about random like hyper-focus rabbit holes of mine, and smoke weed on the internet. Like, seriously, if I could go back in time and tell like little Allie this, like she'd be like, what? Like, yeah, we're like doing witchcraft and stuff. Like, what? Like, yep, that's where we're at, kid. Like, you hang on there. All right, guys, you have a great night, and I will see you later. Bye.